Welcome to Good Catholic Great Stories, where we explore fascinating stories from and for the world of Catholicism.
Welcome back to Good Catholic Great Stories. I'm your host, Christian Tappy. Today, we're very pleased to have Father Donald Calloway with us. Father Calloway is a priest with the Congregation of Marian Fathers of the Immaculate Conception of the Most Blessed Virgin Mary. He's a highly sought-after speaker and evangelist. He's the author of many books, including several about Mary, our Mother, and especially Under the Mantle, Marian Thoughts from a 21st Century Priest, which we'll be discussing a little bit later. He has an amazing conversion story that we'd love to talk with him about today, and we'll get in there in just a second. So we're so glad to have you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Yeah, it's been a crazy year for sure, but I'm alive.
That's great. Yeah, me too. We're in the same boat. So, I want to get into your conversion story in a second. But first, I want to get into your mission. We spend a lot of time on the cool stories that, get us to certain places, but we can often miss out, what we do on a day-to-day basis, which is most of our cases, and including yours, kind of, the big deal of the rest of our lives. So kind of want to talk to you about, what you're doing with the Marian Fathers. There's a chance that many in our audience have either heard you speak or read one of your books, but for those who haven't, give us a little bit of background about, what you do.
Well, lately, not a whole lot because of the situation in the world, but I've been doing a lot of these kind of things, like online interviews, conferences, events. I've done a lot of them, almost one a day, I'd say, for several months now, actually. So that's been great because there's still a lot of outreach and stuff. And then for the people who do know me, they know that I grew this, so it's thrown a lot of people off lately because I come online and as soon as I pop up on their Zoom meeting or whatever, they're like, whoa, who's this? And I'm like, it's me, COVID beard, so so I've been busy, but in a different way. I've only had several in-person events over the last 6 months, but that's starting to pick up again. I'm going to start having more in-person events, which I very much look forward to. But yeah, busy, just doing a lot of praying, a lot of phone calls, and a lot of online meetings.
Yeah, absolutely. I know it's been hard for a lot of us out here who do go on the road and like to talk to people, but I'm sure that you've experienced this as well. As you said, you've been doing maybe one of these a day, but in some ways you can reach a lot more people this way and do it quicker. And I'm sure that it's got some downsides, but there's some upsides to it as well.
Oh no, you're absolutely right. I think even if this craziness goes over in the world, I think a lot of people are going to continue with this online stuff because you're right. You can reach the world.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. It's funny when you look at it in the Catholic world, and oftentimes we're a little slow to kind of adopt technology, and maybe not that no one was doing it, but maybe a pandemic is kind of the kick in the pants we need to really start being power users of these formats, which can reach so many people. So much of your work revolves around Mary, which makes sense because she was very instrumental in your conversion in particular. And that's such a great story. Could you tell us about your background and about your conversion story?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll give you the nutshell version. I wasn't raised in any kind of religious environment, not Christian, not any other religion. And, my mother was in and out of marriages, and I had 3 fathers before I was 10 years old. And just was very much of the world. And so when I went through my preteens and into my teens, I got involved in drugs, alcohol, very immoral life. And we were living in Japan at one point because my stepfather was in the Navy. And I ran away. I got kicked out of the country, came back to the States, went to 2 drug and alcohol rehabilitation centers, turned 18, got thrown in jail in Louisiana. It was a mess. My hair was all the way down to my waist. And, I was a sight. But through all that craziness, my parents had a huge conversion to Catholicism. And I joke around with my mom that I'm the reason that they converted because, I'm actually responsible for them finding God because they needed him to deal with me. So, so I thought they were crazy, though, when they did that. So I resisted. I didn't want to be involved in that. But eventually the divine 2x4 got me when I read a book that my parents had on the Virgin Mary in their home. And that got the ball rolling, and I had my own conversion, fell in love with Jesus Christ, with the Catholic Church, and became Catholic myself, and then discerned my vocation and to be a priest and joined the Marian Fathers. And that was 27 years ago now.
Wow.
And I've been a priest for 17 of those years. So yeah, it's been an amazing journey so far, for sure.
Yeah, that's just incredible. One thing that's always struck me when I've heard your conversion story, either in some of your books or seen some of your talks or things online, is that it's kind of a twist on the prodigal son in a way. You would come home, you've talked about how you would come home, you'd be out of money or whatever, you'd come home and then you'd leave again, right? And I've always been kind of heartened by that and inspired by that, because, we read the prodigal son in the Bible, and he comes home and he stays home, right? And it's obviously talking about God's mercy and how the Father always welcomes us back. But for many of us, it's not that one-time thing. We have to work at it, and it takes coming back again and again and again. That's something that's always kind of really struck me about your story, and it really helps me kind of through my own struggles with different things of keep trying, persisting, keep coming back home.
That's a good point, because I've heard that said by a lot of people too over the years when I've been at conferences or parishes, that it gives them hope, because they've often fallen into that themselves, or their children come home, then they leave, come home, then they leave. And so there's an aspect of a never-ending mercy, a never-ending hope, and just holding on to the reality that sometimes these things take time.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mary brought you back in the church. You read a book on apparitions at your parents' house. This is interesting to me as a cradle Catholic, because I think sometimes we take Mary for granted. And growing up, in the church, I find it intellectually that leap from kind of nothing, right? No religion, no Christianity, to Mary, the mother of God, not Jesus, bringing people back into the church. Can you kind of explain that a little bit, at least in your own situation, how Mary really appealed to you and reached out to you in your journey to the church?
Yeah, I think initially she appealed to me in my manhood, because I'm a guy, and I've lived in a very if this keeps happening, I'm sorry, my computer goes off like a slot machine all day, so I apologize for that. She appealed to me in my manhood because I grew up in a world where I sinned a lot through the flesh. I did very bad things. And so when I read that book that my parents had about the Virgin Mary, all I knew was there was these kids who were talking about seeing a beautiful woman who smelled like roses and came from the heavens in a clap of thunder. And I'm like, what? What's this? What? I had no idea what they were even talking about. And oh man, Father Mike, stop doing that. He's going to probably keep doing that. So I was like, what is this person I've never heard of? Why have I never heard about this woman, right? She seems so beautiful and lovely and smells like roses. Wow, so that drew me in. And only years later would I find a quote from St. Catherine of Siena, where she would say that Mary is the bait that God uses to capture the hearts of men. And I thought, yeah, you ain't kidding, because I think that Jesus could have appeared to me that night years ago in an apparition, and I probably would have shooed away what I thought was some psychological bad moment. That's what I probably would have chalked it up as. Well, what's this? They told me this would happen.
Right.
But this beautiful woman that these kids were talking about, that I couldn't see, that they claimed to see, captivated me. So that drew me in. That was the bait that God used to get me. And then, of course, as I learned more, I realized that she's the mother of Jesus, and she's my spiritual mother, and that she is so lovely and so beautiful. And it's a beauty that doesn't corrupt. It's a beauty that enhances. It's a beauty that brings out the better in someone. And that's certainly what I needed, because I was a pretty filthy, bad sinner, And so Mary truly brought me to Jesus. And so that's a big part of what I try and do now too, is trying to get people to love Mary, so that ultimately they can love Jesus, because it works, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And you had you mentioned your mother before, and so you have your earthly mother and our spiritual mother kind of both pulling on you, and that's pretty powerful. Moms can do a heck of a lot in that regard. I see also, it's funny you mentioned Mary as the bait, right? And St. Catherine of Siena called her the bait. And I can definitely see how that's a great analogy. And I also kind of reminded of, she's also kind of a fisher woman, if you will, kind of taking the apostles there. It's interesting that you read a book of apparitions because, we see Jesus in the Eucharist, right? And we see him in miracles, but, it's Mary who so often is coming to us in the world, right? She's appearing and she's pulling us back to her son. So I think that that's just, an incredible way that she manifests, that love in the world. Very interesting that that's the way that you were brought into the church.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And she continues to do that for me because she refines me. I'm not perfect. I still got a lot of flaws and I mess up all the time, but she, really works with me. And I think that's true with any man. I know that in marriages, oftentimes the couples will tell me, or the man will tell me, I was a wreck before I met her. And then when I married her, she cleaned me up. She helped me to become a better man. Well, I don't have a wife, of course, as a priest, but I do have a woman in my life, and that's the Blessed Virgin Mary. And so she has helped and continues to help me with my rough edges,
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned this. We'll jump ahead quickly here because we're all getting into Marian stuff right now, so it goes well into the book. But in Under the Mantle, one of the chapters that really struck me as a guy was the manhood, section. And we see that it can be a little, what's this about? Because we have our role models in Jesus, and then Joseph as the foster father of Jesus. But something that you pointed out in that chapter was, wouldn't it be great if before Mass we had all these men there praying the Rosary, right? And so we have this kind of soft touch that can take this masculinity that's good and strong, but bring it towards our Lord through this woman, this beautiful woman that you mentioned, through this motherly touch. I'd like to talk about that when you go out and talk and you meet people. What is it, do you think, about men in particular that they can kind of get hung up on moving further into their spirituality and their kind of relationship with Christ, and how can Mary help that?
Yeah, well, I think today, a lot of men are kind of confused about what it even means to be a man, because there's a lot of different ideologies out there today that are saying it means this. No, it means this. Follow me. And so there's a lot of confusion out there. And then sometimes when men want to kind of act in that way that they understand to be traditional manhood, they get put down for it. Like they might get, hey, that's toxic, tone it down, and they're like, okay, sorry, I'm just trying to, act like my grandpa acted, he was a good man. So I think that when we look to, the saints, especially Our Lady and St. Joseph, for example, we're going to get those real examples of what it means to be a man who treats a woman with dignity, with respect, and really in a real sense, reverencing that feminine mystery and dignity, so that you exercise your manhood, that strength you were talking about, in the right way. Because, we are strong physically, that's just how we're made, but we don't want to use that strength in the wrong way to harm anyone or to hurt anybody, whether physically, God forbid, or worse, but even emotionally, psychologically. We want to use that strength in a good way. Well, that's what Mary, when a man gets close to her, she's going to make him that, officer and a gentleman. She's going to make him strong, for sure, for the truth, and never back down. But at the same time, very loving, very tender, very compassionate, just like Joseph was. Just like if you look at a lot of the male saints, they in the pulpit, speaking about priests in particular, they're a lion, they're championing the truth. But then when they're with each individual soul, they're very, very understanding and compassionate and merciful. So that's what Our Lady does, and that's what she wants to do.
That's great. Yeah, it's so powerful to have that soft touch, that mother to go back to again and again, and really make sure that we're tempering that in the way we can, but then also using those skills and those blessings for good. Yeah. So I want to go back quickly. Mary's being such an instrumental part in your conversion, and a lot of other people's conversions, in forming men and forming Christians in general. Here in the South, We're based in Charlotte. I meet people all the time. It's funny. I grew up in the North, and everyone's Catholic, but no one ever talks about it. Here in the South, no one's Catholic, and everyone talks about it all the time. They're all Christians. So I was in the grocery store last Sunday, and I was dressed up coming back from Mass, and the clerk there asked me, "Oh, hey, are you coming back from church?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Where do you go?" And I said, "St. Michael's." He said, "Oh, I haven't heard of that." I said, "Well, it's a Catholic church." And he said, "Oh, so were you worshiping Mary?" And I was just stunned, I've never, you hear these things that are kind of like fairy tales or folk tales, in some Catholic circles, but it's real. I think that there's this misunderstanding, especially in the Protestant world, obviously. But how do we combat that? What are Protestants getting wrong that you see as someone who wasn't Catholic and was drawn in by Mary? What are they getting wrong? And how can we help, when we have these conversations, how can we help soften that?
Yeah, so I think what happens sometimes is, that they don't realize that human aspect of Jesus, so they just focus only on the divine. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, he's divine. He's a divine person, but he did take on human nature, which means that he has a mother, and he loves her so much. It's not like she was insignificant, or God could have just randomly picked any woman. He chose her, planned her for that role, and equipped her for that role with the plenitude of his grace. And so we're talking about a very special woman. And I think that sometimes people forget that. And so I tell them, like, by analogy, look, I'm not the Messiah. I'm not God by any means, right? But I have a mom, and if you want to be close to me, just as a human being, you can't be dissing my mother, right? I mean, so if you come up to me and you say, "Hey, you're cool. I like hanging out with you." "Oh, thanks. That's great." And then the next thing you say is, "But your mom, I don't get it, man. I don't think she's important. I'd actually prefer she not be around us. And I think she's a distraction." I'd be like, "Well, wait a minute. That's not cool. I mean, we were going good for a while there." But yeah, so I think that people just need to realize, yes, she's not God, for sure. Catholic Church has never taught that, never will, because it's not true. But she's the mother of Jesus Christ, who is God. And so that's why she's the mother of God. We're not saying that she's divine herself or she created God. That's silliness, right? But it's just simple logic. Jesus is God, Mary's the mother of Jesus, therefore Mary's the mother of God. It's just, so to think that he would not love her or honor her is just, it takes away his sonship. It takes away an aspect of his humanity. And the saints always say, don't be afraid of loving Mary, because you're never going to love her more than Jesus does,
Yep, absolutely. So this is one of the great points that you get to in Under the Mantle, which I want to talk about. So this is a book that you came out with a few years ago, but it's getting a refresh. It's getting a new cover on it. And I think it's going to be great to get this book back out into the world. Because for me, I loved it. It's just so dense. And I mean that in a good way. Dense can not be used in a bad way, but there's just so many different ways in this book of looking at Mary and understanding her and seeing her relationship with us and with Christ and with God, that it moves fast, but it's something new. There's a different facet, seemingly with every page. One thing that I loved and that comes right away in the book, and I think gets back to this concept of God loving and honoring his mother, but even beyond that is you call her God's masterpiece there. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so this is something that I wish I could take full credit for coming up with this idea, but I didn't. I kind of committed spiritual plagiarism from Venerable Fulton Sheen. So I took it a little further than he did in his thought, but it's basically this, that, let's just say that you're God, and the creation that you've made has fallen, and you're so good that you're going to save them, but you're not going to do it just poof out of the heavens. You're going to come, and all of a sudden you're already formed as a 33-year-old Messiah ready to save the world. No, you're going to come into the world through a mother. Now, remember, you're God. So you're going to make your own mom. I mean, that is extraordinary. And, nobody makes their own mom. It's never been heard of that a son precedes his mother. That's not how it works normally. But with God, he can do that because he's divine. So that's what Jesus did. He made his own mother, which means he's going to make her perfect, flawless, without sin. the devil is going to have no reign whatsoever over his dear mother. Now, if you were God and I were God, I'd do the same thing. Why would I deprive my mother of any beautiful thing? I would be an odd son, actually, if I did that. I'd like, I'm going to make my mother perfect, except for this one little thing. She's going to be quite, messed up. No, that would be rather weird if you had divine power. Well, not only did Jesus do that for his mother, but Mary is, this masterpiece of the Holy Trinity. So God the Father made this perfect little girl, his daughter, right? The Holy Spirit fashioned the perfect bride, the perfect woman. And so, Mary on every level is the masterpiece of the Holy Trinity. And many saints have talked about that. And I just think it's a wonderful way to look at her, to realize the greatness that she is, again, not being God, but such an exalted creature, because God made her for that special purpose of being able to call her his daughter. That's what God the Father would call her. His mother, that's what Jesus calls her. And his bride, that's what the Holy Spirit calls her. So he made a perfect one in Mary. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is absolutely amazing. I think, going back to our discussion about, what Protestants kind of get wrong about it, is just that, right? Here's the mother, the wife, and the bride of God all in one. And you would expect that person to be pretty amazing. And it just unpacks so much stuff. I'll go off on tangents forever, but you just think I love how you talk about how, God's not a magician when you talk about this, right? He made it like he's not magical where it just poof, it's there. Like he makes this work, our salvation, his incarnation within, things that we're familiar with in ways that we can understand, sort of, right? We can't fully understand it, but he makes it relatable to us. And that ultimately, even with Mary as a mother, right? Not just a woman, but a mother who we can all identify with. It's very beautiful.
Yeah, it totally is. No, it absolutely is. And I think that's a great gift for Christianity. So my heart kind of is bummed really by those who either reject her or don't see her importance, because you're missing out on a great gift. At the cross, Jesus said to John the Apostle, but the church, from the very beginning of the church, has always said that John was representative of all of us because he's the beloved disciple, that when Jesus said, behold your mother, that was a gift for all of us. And so how sad that is when somebody rejects that gift of one of Jesus' greatest gifts to us from the cross. So I pray that others would come to love and know her and love her, because ultimately when you do that, it's not about her. It's about growing closer to Jesus. So,
So yeah, let's build on this. So you've through your conversion, you came to the church through Mary, and you've written a lot and talked about this idea of coming to Jesus through Mary. And this is not a new concept. St. Louis de Montfort had the total consecration. But I do think it's something that people sometimes struggle with. We're going to give our all. It's a total consecration to Mary, right? And I think it's important to recognize that it's not stopping there, right? Could you unpack the total consecration a little bit for us today?
Yeah, and that's a great point, because we definitely want people to understand it in the right way. The ultimate end of entrusting yourself or consecrating yourself to Mary is not Mary. The ultimate end is Jesus. So she's a means to an end. And what a means she is, though. When you think about it, who knew Jesus better than his mother, right? And that's true on just a human level in general. So, for example, if somebody watching this, they've never heard of me, and but they wanted to find out about my childhood, and find out what was going on when I was 3 years old or 7 years old or whatever, a really good person to ask would be my mom. She was there through all of it. She knows me very well. And it's going to be the same with Jesus. Mary is going to know him. And, if you think it through, think about, the Gospel of Matthew and Luke, for example, where we get stories about Jesus' childhood. We don't have a lot of them, but we get some of them. Where did they get those? Where did Matthew and Luke get those stories? Did they just fudge it? Did they just, sit down and think, hey, Luke, buddy, we don't actually have a lot of material here. That's a good story. Put that in there. 3 days. Yeah, I like that. He lost the temple. Yeah, it's going to make a lot of sense. Come on. No, they would have got that stuff from the source, which was the mother of Jesus, right? She would have told them about the infancy, for one, because Matthew and Luke, they were probably about the same age as Jesus. They would have been clueless that the Messiah was being born in Bethlehem when it was going down. They were probably being born themselves. So where did they get that stuff? They would have got it from the Virgin Mary, and being, the presentation in the temple, being lost in the temple, all those kind of aspects. So that's important, because a lot of people just think, well, Mary's a distraction, or we don't need to focus on her. Well, she's taught us a lot about Jesus, and she's the one that said, do whatever he tells you, and that other episode, I believe it's in the Gospel of Mark, where Jesus says, Mary and other disciples come to Jesus, and the disciples make Jesus aware that your mother and brothers and sisters, not biological brothers and sisters, because there's a word cousin that's at play there, are wanting to see you. Now, a lot of people have said, when Jesus responds, who are my mother and my brothers, but those who do the will of God? They are my mother and brothers and sisters. A lot of people have said, oh, see, he's putting down Mary. He doesn't want to see her. No, actually, he says, those who are my mothers and brothers and sisters are those who do the will of God. Who did the will of God more? The greatest? Mary. She's like the model, of doing the will of God. Fiat, she said, be it done unto me, she said in response to the angel. So she's not a distraction. She can bring us closer to Jesus. And so I always tell people when they ask, should you really be consecrating yourself to the Virgin Mary? Shouldn't it be only Jesus? Well, think about this. Jesus himself, it says in the Gospel of Luke, he grew in wisdom and stature before God and man under the watchful care of Mary and Joseph. So if Jesus gave himself into the care of the Virgin Mary, hey, that's good enough for me, So I ask her, Mary, help me to come to know and love the Jesus that you know and love, the Jesus that you worship and adore. I want to be like you. I want to be super close to him. And you can help me in that, Mary. And she does. And that's what it's all about, So ultimately, it's all about Jesus. And she's just the greatest means to get super close to Jesus.
That's great. One of the other analogies you used in Under the Mantle, which I thought was great, and I'm just going to kind of throw it out there cold for our audience, because when I first read it, I was like, what? But chess. And this tells us about Mary and Jesus.
Yeah.
Tell us how.
When I read this, when I found this stuff out in the lives of saints and popes, I was like, what is this? Because I had read and I heard that certain saints love to play the game of chess. Popes love to play the game of chess. I mean, St. John Paul II, St. Maximilian Kolbe, St. Teresa of Avila, who's a doctor of the church. She actually has a little section on the game of chess in her book called The Way of Perfection. St. Thomas More, tons of them. And I was like, what's up with that? Why this fascination with chess? Well, then I learned that chess and its history, the way that we play it today, comes out of a Catholic culture. And so it's very black and white, it's very, there's no ambiguity on the board. I wonder which side I'm on. No, it's very clear, but the pieces are revealing. So you've got a king, and the whole game is about the king. Anybody who tells you differently, they don't know what they're talking about. They don't know how to play chess, right? It's all about the king, always. But you've got a queen. Interesting. You've got bishops. You've got knights. You've got pawn. It's vocations, so to speak, in the spiritual life. Now, who has the most mobility on the board? The queen. And the king isn't jealous. He's not saying, how offended I am. Pay attention to me. It's all about me. Yes, it's all about you. We know that. But he gave her that ability. He delights in it. Because if you fight for the queen, you're fighting for the king. And everybody knows who plays chess that if you lose the queen, game over. Game over. But not everybody knows this, that if the queen and just one of the bishops, just one, if they work together, you can conquer the enemy in 4 moves. Wow. That is a fact. All the Russian masters, they know, they all start off with that, but they all know it. So they got to go other places to play the game. But for those who don't know, I mean, this is the reality of it. And this is the saints were using that game analogy about the spiritual life. If we want to bring hearts to the king. Let's give the queen mobility. The king has given her that privilege, any number of squares in any direction, to bring people to defend and to bring people to the king. And that's why I just love that analogy of chess. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's great. It's something I never thought about, and that initially, when I read, I was like, "What is this?" And then as soon as you get into it, oh yeah, this is amazing, and it makes total sense. It seems like it was made for this, right?
Yeah.
So we've talked about men, right? We've talked about Mary's role with men, but I wanted to talk a little bit about Mary's role in the femininity. This makes more sense, I think, on the surface, right? Because Mary's a woman, and we can definitely see her example there. But then we dig a little deeper, and we see in the world today, we have so much focus on women and femininity, and which can be good and great, but it's so twisted, right? And it just takes that focus on the wonderful aspect of women and these beautiful creatures who are God's children and twist that. So what's the role of Mary today for women when there's such a focus, but it seems to be drawing women away from who they really are?
Yeah, it is an ironic thing, isn't it? That in a lot of universities that have, for example, women's studies departments, they don't study the Blessed Virgin Mary. How could you do that? How could you overlook that? Because she's the model of femininity, just like if you're in engineering school and you want to learn how to build a bridge, it's a really good idea to look at the blueprints. If you want to if there's problems that need to be fixed, you need to go back to that drawing board and say, I see what it is. It's this. We need to shore this part up of it so it doesn't collapse. So that's the odd thing is today, a lot of people are into women's studies and things of that nature. Okay, but you got to go to the source. And that, unfortunately, is what a lot of people don't do because they're really, really not interested in women's studies. There's something that's gone off the rails, that there's a kind of wanting to remake humanity in our own image or do what we want with it. So that people today, we've gone crazy with this, saying that there's, I don't know what it is now, the latest count of how many genders there are. I'm like,
Infinite.
wow, that is, to me, it's you're a boy or a girl. Yes, there's gender dysphoria when some young children are young, and all the studies show that you work through that. If that's something that you're experiencing as a young person. But today you've got people who say, no, it's okay. You can switch and you can become something else. You can use whatever pronoun you want to identify yourself. And I'm like, wow, even when I was growing up, nobody was saying this kind of stuff, but today it is. And so I think that Mary, if we bring her into all of these things, we can realize what women are called to be in that feminine mystery, because it's a lovely mystery. It is a wonderful mystery. It's at the heart of creation. It's that feminine genius. It's that beauty that is so necessary and so equal, because a lot of people, if you raise these kind of questions, they think, see, you're thinking that all it means to be a woman is to be barefoot, pregnant in the kitchen, cooking for a man. And I'm like, that's not what people are saying, but there's something there that realizes that all women are called to a form of motherhood. Your very body is wired towards this. And sometimes it doesn't happen because of maybe a physical impossibility or something outside of your control. But even women who join convents and become nuns, are often called mother, mother superior. It's something innate to the feminine mystery. Or women in the single life. I have a friend who's a consecrated virgin, and she sees her vocation as being a spiritual mother for her students. And it's a beautiful thing. It really is. And I think that we need to get back to these beautiful mysteries that are not oppressive, that it's not, a burden. I mean, today, how sad is it that there are even, I see it all the time on TV, commercials that tell women, basically, it's a burden to be a woman. You don't want to be a mother. Get rid of your monthly cycle. Take this pill. You only get it maybe 3 times a year. But they don't know that this pill oftentimes causes cancer because you're doing things that aren't natural with your body. And it's very detrimental, not only to your body, but also psychologically and to that beautiful gift that God has given you, which all men bow down to.
Yep.
This is the thing, I mean, the feminine mystery is worthy of reverence, is worthy of veneration. I mean, you bring new life into the world. Without you, the world would not go around. I mean, you're the heart of creation and redemption. The greatest human person, Jesus is a divine person. The greatest human person who ever lived was not a man, was a woman, the Virgin Mary. I mean, that is just something extraordinary to think about. So, all men, all popes, all priests, all angels bow down to the mystery and the wonder of the feminine mystery. I think we're only going to recapture that if we get back to the Virgin Mary.
Yeah, absolutely. And it what you just said about her being the most perfect human, what a blind spot, right? And this movement that wants to say, elevate and say, you don't need to. God already made you the picture of humanity, right? And what a great gift it would be if we could somehow get back to that notion and bring her to the world. I think that's something to definitely strive for, and something that I'm thankful for you and everybody else, in the Marian Fathers and elsewhere who are bringing the good news of Mary even to the world. I want to talk about a little bit about the Marian Fathers and also this chapter in your book, Under the Mantle, on divine mercy. So the Marian Fathers obviously have a great devotion to Mary, but also a great charism with the divine mercy. And you in particular have that as well. So I thought it was very interesting that in looking at divine mercy, it comes from Christ, and he revealed it to Sister Faustina. Where does Mary come in here? How is it related to Our Lady?
Yeah, it is an interesting question, and even with our community, because we were founded, the Marian Fathers, in 1670, which was quite a while before Saint Faustina was on the scene. But we got entrusted with promoting the message and devotion of divine mercy by St. John Paul II during his pontificate. So we really took that up. A lot of it had to do with the Polish connection there, with our community being found in Poland and all of that. And we knew St. John Paul II very well. But it's a perfect fit because our community is dedicated to Mary, but specifically to her as the Immaculate Conception. We're called the Marian Fathers of the Immaculate Conception. And so the Divine Mercy message really has a lot to say about Our Lady, because she is the one who received perfect mercy. And a lot of people think, well, now, wait a minute. The Catholic Church teaches that Mary wasn't a sinner, right? Yes, that's right. But only because God planned it that way and made it that way because of his mercy that he showed to Mary. And so in order to understand that better, what one person a long time ago said, Blessed John Duns Scotus, when people were trying to understand this, how do we affirm the Immaculate Conception and yet, acknowledge God's act here of doing something to make that gift to her true? God can save us in one of two ways. Now, once we fall into the pit, he can get us out. And that's what he does for all of us, with one exception. He saved Mary from falling into the pit in the first place. So that means that he gave her even a greater amount of mercy than he gave to us, because he's going to make her the mother of a new humanity, like a new Eve, the mother of all the living. And a mother can't give what a mother doesn't have. And she has it in abundance. She's the mother of mercy. And so in order to regenerate humanity with a new Adam and a new Eve, well, God gave her that gift of preserving her from falling into the pit, anticipating, her role and her importance for our sake, for the good of the church, for the good of souls. And so she is the recipient of God's unfathomable mercy in an extraordinary way. And so, you can connect it in that way, and you can preach Our Lady as the masterpiece of mercy, as the masterpiece of divine mercy. That's deep theology, I know, but at the same time, it's beautiful to think about. And so we bring that aspect into our promotion of the Divine Mercy message and talk about how lovely she is, how filled with God's grace she is, and how as a good mother, she helps her children to receive that mercy of God and to get out of that pit, to become beautiful, to go to the sacraments and to acquire virtue and race towards heaven.
Yeah, that's great. And it really does show out the interconnectedness here of all these different aspects of our spirituality and Jesus and God and his plan and how Mary is always there, right? She's always there and designed that way, right? To be our great help. I want to circle back a little bit to the Rosary. This is another thing that I think that you've written extensively about in your life. The Champions of the Rosary is another great book of yours. So, Mary's called throughout in various apparitions has called us to say the Rosary, right? And we get that intellectually, and it can be hard, and we don't do it. And it's something simple, but that, and a lot of families especially, right? It's something that just kind of falls through the cracks. Talk a little bit about how that Rosary can be wielded really as a weapon, right? It's not necessarily a passive thing, but this is an active tool in our spirituality. Can you go into that a little bit for us?
Yeah, I mean, I know from my own experience what it's done for me. I mean, it was a huge part in helping me to convert to Catholicism, and then it's been my daily companion for 27 years. I just absolutely love it. And it's basically the Bible on a set of beads is what it is. It's portable prayer is what the Rosary, you can pray it anywhere, at any time, driving a car, walking your dog, waiting in the dentist's office, anywhere and everywhere. And the origins of it are that in the 13th century, there was a Saint Dominic at that time preaching in France against a particular heresy, but he wasn't having much fruit. And tradition says he went on like a retreat in a forest, and that's when Our Lady came to him and gave him the Rosary and told him to use it as an evangelical tool and a new form of preaching. And she specifically told him that it was to be a battering ram against falsehoods. And that's where we started that language of it being like a spiritual weapon. And it didn't take long because the Dominicans, they began to wear their Rosary on the left side of their religious habit. Now, why is that? What's the significance of that? Well, most people are right-handed, and at the time when Our Lady gave St. Dominic the Rosary, it was a time of chivalry and knights and swords. And so when you unsheath your sword, you use your right hand, grabbing it from your left to unsheath it. So the Dominicans, the Franciscans, Carmelites, a ton of other mendicant religious communities that have a Rosary as part of their religious habit, they began to put it on the left to signify that it was a spiritual sword. And that continues up to this present day. And so, when you talk about the Rosary as a weapon, sometimes people, they freak out with that terminology. They're like, ooh, prayer's not a weapon. And we're like, well, wait a minute. St. Paul said that the word of God is sharper than any two-edged sword, able to slay strongholds. And, so it is a weapon when you understand it the right way. We're not talking about, bringing about bloodshed or anything here. We're talking about slaying the forces of darkness, overcoming vice and sin and acquiring virtue and good things. And that's what the Rosary does, because so many of us struggle with sins that get into our mind first, and then we latch onto it. We don't just let it go, because we all think about things we shouldn't, but then we don't latch onto it. Great, we've got a victory there. But when we do, and then we act on it, oh boy, that's a no-no, right? But the Rosary is to make like a spiritual pilgrimage. You're literally going to the holy places, the sacred and saving mysteries of Jesus in your mind and your heart when you meditate and pray those mysteries. So you're thinking about Bethlehem, you're thinking about the scourging, you're thinking about all these things. And it's like you're making a daily pilgrimage, and anybody and everybody can do it. You don't have to have a doctorate. You don't have to be some great speaker. You can be a farmer in Iowa, and you can make a daily pilgrimage by praying the Rosary. And you can slay dragons when you pray the Rosary. You can become virtuous when you pray the Rosary, because you will turn away from sin. You will. You cannot pray the Rosary on a daily basis and continue to watch filthy, perverse films. There'll be a disconnect. You're either going to give up one or the other. You're either going to continue watching that sick stuff, and you're going to give up the Rosary, or you're going to make the Rosary and you're going to get rid of that stuff. It's just tried and true method of growing in holiness.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, it's so great about the Rosary as a weapon, and we see Mary as kind of our our leader there in battling against Satan and darkness and evil. And we've seen her as mother, and we've seen her as bride, and we've seen her as leading men into true manhood and women into true femininity. Just these absolute treasure trove of ways that she can help us. And as I said at the outset, that's something that I just love about Under the Mantle. You dive in and it's so dense in the best possible way that there's just uncovering different facets, almost like a diamond, right? Of just seeing different sides of how she's there, how she's helping us, how wonderfully she's made. And I would really encourage everyone to go out and read Under the Mantle. It's getting a second life. It's getting a new cover. It's going to be out there again. And it's well worth your while. We'll have links to it, on the screen and in the text and the audio. But Father Calloway, before I let you go, as people are rediscovering this book, what's one thing that you would wish for them to get out of it?
Yeah, well, I'm so happy to see it kind of getting a second life, because we're living in very confusing times today. There's a lot of people who are questioning, wow, are things changing even in the church? Is the church's teaching going to change on this issue or that issue? And my answer is absolutely not. Sadly today, a lot of people, you can talk to people in the church and they think, oh no, it's changing. Well, no, we're just going through a very difficult time in the world and in the church. There's a lot of, division, a lot of confusion, but we're going to get through this. And Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So don't lose hope in that. That's unchanging truth, always going to be the same. That's what I hope people get out of it, because these are crazy times that we're living in. So I want to give people a message that the truth doesn't change, and there's great reason for hope.
That's great. Once again, the book is Under the Mantle. You can pick it up at Catholic Company. You can pick it up at Marian Press. You can pick it up on Amazon, wherever books are sold. Go check it out today. It's really great. I can say with certainty that it will change your outlook on your faith and your spirituality. It's going to help you grow. Father Calloway, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure. We hope to have you back again sometime.
Thanks, brother. God bless you.
All right. Take care.